So it was up to Jay and the Americans to oversee the production of the Trolley's first album, but to sell it, they would need a record contract. Now, Artie Kornfeld was a Brooklyn kid who was born just as his policeman father got called up for World War II, leaving him and his politically progressive mother to live out the duration with an uncle in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn. After the war, the family moved into one of William Levitt's cookie-cutter houses on Long Island, where the public school offered free musical education and instrument rentals for $1 a year. Artie wanted to play the drums, but all those sets had been taken, so he had to settle for a trumpet, which he came to love, though his attention was increasingly drawn to the rock and roll that was being played on the radio. With adolescence came a guitar, and Artie started writing songs and performing around school. Like a lot of guys, he wrote a song for his girlfriend, a girl named Vicky Spencer, whose dad, Lou, was one of the Dunhill Dancers, a trio that performed in the movies and on national variety shows like Ed Sullivan's. Lou liked the song. After all, it was about his daughter, and decided to introduce Artie to Roz Ross, who was a prominent rock agent at the General Artists Corporation over in Manhattan. She liked it too, and signed Artie to a deal. Before he knew it, he found himself in a professional recording studio, and if all that wasn't enough, two of Roz's other clients were playing and singing backup, Dion and the Belmonts and the Skyliners. Despite all that, the record went nowhere, and neither did his deal. Artie somehow convinced music lawyer and agent Jim Gribble to manage him. Now, Jim Gribble had a pretty good stable of talent that included the likes of the Mystics, Simon and Garfunkel, then known as Tom and Jerry, as well as Jay and the Americans. But Artie was still attending Queens College, and while there, he and a couple of buddies wrote a song called Fink, which referenced Tonight Show host Steve Allen's use of an offstage bird who he named Fink. One day, while sitting around the student union, Artie was telling some friends that he was going to go over to Manhattan to see a buddy of his who was a big-time music producer, a guy named Charles Kopelman. Trouble was, Artie didn't really know him, not at all. Astonishingly, and for reasons unknown, Mr. Kopelman happened to be sitting within earshot of Artie, and he decided to introduce himself. Artie was mortified, but Charles took a liking to him and decided to invite him to come over to his office, and this led to Artie getting a songwriting deal with rock impresario Don Kirshner. At age 21, Artie was working full-time in the Brill Building, writing songs and learning the music and promotion business from one end of it to the other. During this time, Artie co-wrote She Doesn't Know It for Jay and the Americans. He also teamed up with Jan Berry and together wrote I Adore Him for the Shirelles. This was followed by cuts for Jan and Dean's Drag City album, and then Dead Man's Curve, writing with Jan and the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson. After an ownership change, Artie found himself working for Mercury Records, and he moved into A&R, where he could put to better use his production and promotional talents. Round about 1965, Artie and Duboff write and record the iconic Pied Piper song, which to Artie's surprise charts and earns him and Duboff a spot on Sonny and Cher's tour. Concurrently, Mercury asks Artie to produce one of their acts, an actual family of talented musicians named the Cowsills. Artie really believed in the Cowsills, and when Mercury allowed their contract to lapse, he took the opportunity to leave Mercury to sign the band for himself. He went right to work with Steve Duboff writing songs for the band, one of which was The Rain, The Park, and Other Things, which went to #1. Internal disagreements lead Artie and the Cowsills to part ways, which in turn led Artie to accept an offer by Capitol Records to be their first vice president of rock and roll music. One of the bands he will sign is produced by his old friend Sandy Yaguda of Jay and the Americans. These guys, the Tuneful Trolley.